The sky over the royal palace of Varelia was glowing with twin moons. Inside the tall crystal tower, silence filled the birthing chamber. Everyone stared at the small creature lying in the golden cradle. She was no bigger than a cat, her skin pale and smooth like pearl, and her wings, soft and limp, didn't move. One of her legs was twisted, her fingers were curled inward. An elder whispered, "A broken child." Another muttered, "She will never rule." The queen turned her face away, tears welling in her glowing eyes. The king looked at his advisors and said coldly, "No public record of this birth." The baby girl didn't cry, didn't laugh, just looked up with wide silver eyes. They gave her no name. To the court, she didn't exist. They ordered the servants to lock her away in the tower's farthest room, hidden, forgotten, silent. But the baby lived. She grew slowly, much slower than normal alien children. Her bones were fragile, her steps unbalanced, and her wings still limp. No tutors were sent to teach her. No family visited. Only an old servant woman named Maya brought her food and whispered bedtime songs at night. Still, the girl never spoke. She just sat by the window every night, staring at the stars. Something about the stars called to her, soft and distant, like a voice without words. Years passed, and the palace forgot the disabled princess. Parties were held, wars were fought, and new royal heirs were celebrated. But in the silent room above all others, the girl sat with her ear pressed against an old receiver. It was a dusty device, once used to hear space signals from distant planets. One day, by chance or fate, a soft voice came through the static. It was a human voice, calm, warm, and clear. He was reading a story about a lost child who became a hero. The girl's eyes widened, her lips trembled. She couldn't understand all the words, but something in his tone felt kind. Every night she turned on the receiver. Every night he read another story. Sometimes fairy tales, sometimes sad poems, sometimes just the way he said goodnight made her heart ache. For the first time, she smiled. For the first time, she felt like someone was talking to her, not about her, but to her. Maya noticed the change. "You're glowing, little star," she said softly, brushing the girl's white hair. The princess only nodded and turned back to the stars. She still hadn't spoken a word. But deep inside, something was waking up, something powerful. Down below, in the royal court, no one cared about the tiny girl in the tower, but far across the stars, a lonely human kept reading stories into the void. He didn't know someone was listening. He didn't know that his words had reached the heart of a girl who had never been loved, and he didn't know that soon those words would change both their lives forever. Ethan lived alone in a small observatory on the edge of a quiet mountain. The sky above him was always clear, and the stars felt like neighbors. Every night, he powered up his old transmitter and began to read. He had been doing this for months, maybe even years. He didn't know if anyone was listening, but it made him feel less alone. He called it the silent broadcast. He picked stories from Earth's old books, fairy tales, poems, and sometimes just stories he made up himself. He'd say, "If anyone is out there, this is for you," and then start reading. There were no replies, no signals back, just silence. But he still smiled as he read. He believed that maybe, just maybe, someone far away needed to hear a kind voice. Back on Varelia, high in her hidden tower, the tiny alien princess listened every night. She couldn't understand all the Earth words, but Ethan's voice was soft and gentle. When he laughed, her heart felt warm. When he read sad stories, she cried quietly. Maya, the old caretaker, didn't know why the girl sat by the receiver each night, but she let her. "It's better than the silence," she whispered once, wiping away a tear from the girl's cheek. Ethan sometimes spoke about his own life. He talked about his dog who passed away, about the stars he used to name as a child. He told stories of heartbreak and hope, and each word sank into the little princess's heart like music. She still didn't have a name, not a real one, but in her mind, she started calling herself Star, because he often said, "Good night, stars, wherever you are." One night, Ethan read a story about a girl who could not walk, but she still saved her village by being brave and kind. The princess sat up straighter, her hand shaking as she reached toward the speaker. No one had ever told her a story where the broken girl was the hero. She didn't know it was allowed. That night, when Ethan finished and said, "Good night out there," the princess whispered for the first time in years. "Good night, human," she said softly, her voice tiny. No one heard her except the stars. But it was the beginning. Ethan, miles away on Earth, leaned back in his chair, staring at the blinking stars. He had no idea someone had spoken back. Not yet. But the next day, something strange happened. He found a small message on his receiver, weak, glitchy, and full of static. It said only 4 words. "I hear you, human." His eyes widened. He checked the logs, checked the frequency, thought maybe it was a prank, but something about the message felt real. It wasn't written like a joke. It was innocent, raw, almost like a child's hand reaching through the dark. He replied, "Hello, who are you?" There was no answer that night, or the next, but on the 3rd day, another message came. "Your voice is warm." Ethan smiled, heart beating faster than usual. Someone was out there, someone who had been listening all this time. He didn't know who or where or even what species, but he knew one thing. His words had reached someone who needed them, and on the far-off world of Varelia, the tiny broken princess clutched the old receiver to her chest. She didn't know if he would ever understand her, but his words had already saved her from the silence, and in her mind, she whispered again, "Please don't stop reading." The royal tower was quiet that morning. Rain touched the glass window gently, and the air smelled like dust and cold stone. The tiny alien princess, still hidden from the world, sat near her old receiver. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the button again. She had already sent 3 messages, but this time she wanted to say more. Maya, the caretaker, watched from the door with silent worry in her eyes. The girl barely spoke, but ever since the strange voice from the stars had reached her, she had changed. She smiled sometimes. Her steps were slow but stronger. She even hummed softly when alone. But today was different. The princess leaned forward, took a deep breath, and whispered one word into the speaker. "Ethan." It was small and quiet, but it was clear. The name felt like sunlight in her mouth. She didn't know what it meant to him, only that it belonged to the voice that made her feel whole. Maya gasped, her eyes wide. You spoke," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. The girl turned and nodded, then looked back at the stars beyond the window. Maya rushed out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the tower. She had to tell the queen. The broken girl had spoken, and not just any word. She had spoken a name, a human's name. Down in the palace halls, word spread quickly. The council was horrified. A disabled princess speaking a human name? What kind of shame is this? One noble growled. "She must be silenced before others find out," said another. The queen was silent, her face pale and unreadable, but her heart was racing. Deep down, she felt the guilt she had buried for years crawling back. Back in the tower, guards arrived. They stormed into the room and tore the receiver from the wall. "No more human lies for you," one snarled. The princess screamed, not in words, but a sound of heartbreak and fear. She crawled after the device, her small hands reaching, her legs dragging behind her. Maya fought them, begging them to stop. "She's just a child," she cried. "She found something good. Let her keep it." But they ignored her. The guards took the device away, leaving only dust and silence behind. The princess lay curled on the cold floor, her wings limp, her voice gone again, but not her heart. No, something inside her had changed forever. She had spoken, she had said a name, and that name was her hope. On Earth, Ethan sat waiting beside his receiver. The last message had been 3 days ago. He kept checking, adjusting the settings, hoping to hear her again. Was it a dream, he whispered to himself? But then a sound, a faint voice came through, almost lost in static. Ethan, the voice said again, weak but real. His hand shook as he grabbed the microphone. "I'm here," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Can you hear me? What's your name?" But no reply came. Just silence, long and deep. He leaned back in his chair, heart aching. He didn't know what had happened, but someone out there knew his name. Someone far away had trusted him enough to say it, and he wasn't going to stop reaching back. In her broken cradle of stone and shadows, the tiny alien princess clutched the memory of his voice. They had taken her receiver, but they could not take his name from her. She held it in her heart like a flame, and silently, she promised she would speak it again. Days passed in silence. The tower room felt colder without the soft hum of the receiver. The tiny alien princess sat curled by the window, her face pale, her eyes dull. She no longer smiled, no longer whispered. Even Maya's gentle words could not lift her spirit. But deep in her heart, she remembered one thing: his name, Ethan. She repeated it silently, over and over, like a song only she could hear. That name gave her warmth when the world felt frozen. Maya knew the girl was fading again. She couldn't let that happen. Late one night, she snuck into the royal tech storage. Her hands shook as she searched through piles of broken machines and forbidden relics. Finally, she found what she needed: an old communicator from before the war. It barely worked, its wires exposed and buttons rusted, but it could send a signal. Back in the tower, Maya fixed it up as best she could. The princess watched with wide eyes, hope flickering inside her again. "This is your voice now," Maya said softly, handing her the transmitter. "But only once, child, or they'll take everything." The girl nodded and reached out with trembling fingers. Her heart pounded, but she closed her eyes and pressed the button. Far away on Earth, Ethan was awake, sipping cold tea and staring at the sky. He hadn't heard from her in days. His broadcasts continued, but his heart wasn't in them. He missed the strange, broken messages that had once filled his nights with wonder. Then, suddenly, beep, a light blinked on his console. A message had arrived. He opened it quickly, eyes wide, breath held. It said, "They broke the voice machine, but I remember your sound, Ethan. You make the dark go away." Ethan's hands shook as he read the words again and again. It wasn't just a message, it was a cry, a confession, and a gift. Tears welled up in his eyes. He didn't know who she was, what planet she lived on, or what such species she belonged to, but her words were more human than anything he had read in years. He typed back quickly, "I'm here. I never stopped reading. I'll never stop. Tell me your name." Back in the tower, the princess saw the reply flash across the tiny screen. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. She wanted to answer, but the transmitter began to spark. It had overheated, the wires melting, smoke rising. Maya quickly pulled it away before it exploded. "It's gone," she said sadly. "I'm sorry." But the princess wasn't sad this time. She had sent the message, and he had replied. He was still there, still reading, still waiting. The next morning, the queen entered the tower. Her face was tight, her robe heavy with gold and pride. "I heard what you did," she said coldly. The girl didn't look at her. The queen stepped closer, staring down at the small creature on the floor. "You will never be queen, do you understand?" The princess finally looked up, and to the queen's surprise, she smiled. "I don't want to be queen," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I just want to hear him again." The queen froze, her mouth slightly open. She turned and left without another word. That night, Ethan opened his broadcast with a new message. He didn't know if she'd hear it, but he spoke from the heart. "To the one who remembers my voice, your words changed my life. You are not alone, not anymore." And somewhere in the shadows of a forgotten tower, a tiny girl smiled again. She had no wings, no throne, no name that the world respected, but she had something stronger, his words, and they were more powerful than anyone had ever known. The royal court had made up their minds long ago. The tiny princess in the tower was a burden, a mistake they tried to forget. She could not walk without help, her legs weak and thin. Her wings never grew strong like the others of her kind. They hung behind her, soft and useless. "She'll never fly," they whispered with cold smiles. "She's not a real Varelian," some said. "She is broken," others agreed. But none of them saw what Maya saw. The old caretaker saw fire in the girl's eyes every time Ethan's voice echoed through that tiny room. The girl still had no name in the royal record, but in her own heart she had given herself one star, because every night she looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm still here." In secret, Maya brought her scraps of wire and broken circuits. The princess taught herself how to fix old tech using only one hand and her teeth. It was slow, painful work, but she didn't stop. I will hear him again, she told herself. No one can take that away from me. In the halls below, the nobles celebrated the birth of a new heir, a perfect, strong-winged prince. The tower was ignored once again, the guards replaced by sleepy, careless men. It was the perfect chance. That night, she finished repairing a small receiver. It was weak, and its range barely reached orbit, but she didn't care. She sent one more message to Ethan. I can't fly, but I can feel your words. Are you still there, human? Ethan's heart skipped when he saw the blinking signal. He had been watching the stars every night, hoping, waiting. When he read her message, his hands trembled. He answered right away. I never stopped. And you don't need wings to fly. The words hit her like lightning. She repeated them again and again. You don't need wings to fly. She carved the sentence onto the wall using a sharp rock. She looked at it every morning when she woke up and every night before she slept. The queen found out about the signal. She ordered the guards to check the tower again, but they found nothing this time. The girl had hidden the receiver under the floorboards. She was careful now, clever and quiet. She had learned the world didn't give second chances. Still, the queen wasn't satisfied. She climbed the tower herself, her long robe dragging across the floor. She stood before the girl and stared down with cold eyes. You will never be accepted, she said. You are not like us. The princess looked at her and whispered, I know. But someone out there thinks I matter. The queen turned without a word and left. She didn't understand why the words stung so much. Maybe because they were true. Ethan, back on Earth, began reading not just fairy tales, but stories he wrote just for her. He spoke about a girl who could not fly, but still touched the sky. He didn't know her name, but he knew her heart, and every word he spoke, he meant it. One night, the girl whispered to Maya, I want to meet him. Maya froze, unsure what to say. He's far away, she replied, across stars and storms. The girl nodded, then I'll find a way across the stars. She may never fly, but she was done hiding. She didn't want to be a forgotten name in a dusty tower. She wanted to be heard, and someone out there was already listening. The stars were quiet that night, too quiet. The tiny alien princess sat by her secret receiver, waiting for Ethan's voice to return. She had sent him a message the night before, one filled with hope. One day, I'll come to you, she had whispered. But now the machine was silent. No words, no stories, no gentle human voice, only cold static. She waited, hour after hour, her silver eyes wide and worried. Maybe his power went out, she thought. Maybe he fell asleep. But deep in her chest, something didn't feel right. Far away, beyond her world, Ethan's voice had indeed gone silent. Not by choice. A solar storm had struck near Earth's outer satellites. One of the old deep space broadcast towers had collapsed under the pressure. The storm had melted circuits, fried antennas, and silenced thousands of messages. Ethan was safe, but cut off. He didn't even know she was still trying to reach him. On Varelia, days passed with no signal. The princess sat near the receiver each night, her small hands pressing the button again and again. Ethan, can you hear me? She whispered, but the silence answered her every time. Maya noticed the girl's smile fading again. Her shoulders drooped. Her hands stopped moving. She's slipping away, Maya said quietly to herself. The silence is killing her. One morning, the girl didn't eat. She sat by the window, wings limp, her voice gone once more. She stared at the stars, unmoving. The queen heard about it and visited the tower. She stood at the doorway and looked in without stepping closer. What does she wait for? She asked coldly. Maya replied, she waits for a voice that once gave her life. The queen scoffed, a human voice? She belongs to Varelia, not Earth. But she didn't say it with strength, only confusion. A part of her began to wonder what kind of voice could bring a child back from nothing, far across space. Ethan worked a day and night trying to fix his signal. He contacted old engineers, begged for access to alternative towers. He didn't care about rules anymore. He just needed to talk to her. He hadn't heard her voice in days, and that silence felt worse than anything he'd known. Back in the tower, the princess made a decision. If the voice couldn't come to her, she would go to it. She waited until nightfall, then snuck out of her room. She moved slowly, dragging her weak leg behind her, her hands clutching a map Maya had given her. Her goal was the royal launch bay, deep underground, hidden beneath the palace. Most guards ignored her. No one believed the tiny broken girl could be a threat, but they were wrong. She had fire in her heart, even if her wings didn't fly. She reached the launch bay, coughing, exhausted, but determined. There, buried under sheets, she found an old pod ship, damaged, forgotten, but still alive. Maya appeared behind her with a small bag of supplies. "I knew you would try," she said softly, "so I brought food." The princess nodded, tears in her eyes. "Tell them I'm not running," she whispered. "I'm flying, with different wings." As the pod powered up, the lights flickered weakly, engines sparked, and systems coughed awake. But it worked. The ship lifted slowly into the sky, breaking through the clouds. Down below, the queen watched from her tower, her lips tight. She didn't send anyone after the girl. For the first time in her life, she felt respect, maybe even pride. And high above Virelia, through cold darkness and swirling stars, the broken princess chased a voice that once saved her. She didn't know if he was still waiting, but she was coming, and she carried his words with her, like light in the dark. The pod ship shook as it entered open space. The lights inside flickered, warning alarms blinked on and off, but the tiny alien princess didn't stop. She sat in the pilot's seat with a harness strapped tight across her thin chest. Her twisted leg was numb. Her small fingers gripped the controls like her life depended on it. This was her first time leaving the tower, her first time seeing the stars up close. And though fear filled her heart, hope burned hotter. She didn't know how long the ship would hold or where exactly Earth was. She only knew one thing. Ethan's voice had given her life. Now she would cross the galaxy to find him. Maya had slipped a small recorder into her pack. It had one message saved, her voice trembling but clear. "If anything happens, tell him." His words made me feel alive. She played it once, then tucked it away. She didn't plan on dying, but she wanted to be sure her truth reached him, even if she didn't. The ship's engines groaned, fighting against the pull of a nearby gravity belt. Metal creaked, fuel levels dropped, and the oxygen meter blinked yellow. Still, she flew on. Every night, she stared out the window, whispering Ethan's name to the stars. She ate very little, drank only enough to survive. She didn't sleep much. Every dream was filled with static and silence. Far across the galaxy, Ethan was working in an old orbital station. He had begged his way aboard after the broadcast tower failed. With tools in hand and determination in his chest, he helped repair damaged equipment. All he wanted was to restore communication. No one knew who he was reaching, and most didn't care. But he did. "Someone out there needs to hear me," he said, over and over. And so he worked, day and night. One evening, while adjusting a backup antenna, he caught a strange signal, weak, broken, almost lost in space dust. But there was a pattern in it, like one tapping in a rhythm. Then came a burst of static, followed by words. "Ethan, I'm flying." His heart stopped. It was her. He dropped his tools, ran to the control deck, and boosted the signal. More words came through. "Ship is weak, but I'm coming. Don't stop reading." He stared at the screen, tears building. She was on her way. She had left her world behind, broken body and all, just to find his voice. He pressed the microphone, speaking quickly. "I'm here. Hold on, I'll find you." Back in the pod, the princess heard the reply, faint but real. A weak smile lit her face. Her body was aching, lungs heavy, limbs shaking, but she felt stronger than ever before. Suddenly, red lights flashed, an engine failure warning. The ship had pushed too far on too little power. Systems failed one by one, and the stars outside started spinning. She gripped the sides of her chair, breathing hard. She whispered, "I'm not afraid." Ethan tracked her signal, calling in every favor he had. He contacted a nearby rescue ship, gave coordinates, and screamed into the comms. "Find her, please, find her." The rescue vessel launched instantly, heading into the dark toward the faint signal. Inside the dying pod, the princess clutched her chest. Her fingers touched the spot where she had drawn Ethan's name with chalk. She smiled again, even as her vision faded. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You didn't stop." The last thing she heard was a voice over the ship's speaker. "We see your vessel. We're coming." The rescue ship hovered near the tiny pod. Steam hissed from its vents, and mechanical arms reached out to lock onto the broken vessel. Inside, the alien princess lay still, her breathing slow, her skin pale like moonlight. Her tiny hands were wrapped around a cracked data pad, the word Ethan drawn across it in chalk. The rescue team broke the pod open and rushed in. "She's alive!" one of them shouted. "Barely!" They carried her gently into the medical bay, unsure of what species she was, but it didn't matter. What they saw was a child, fragile and brave. Ethan waited at the space station docking bay, pacing with anxious steps. When the rescue ship arrived, he pushed past the crowd, his eyes searching every stretcher. Then he saw her. Tiny, wrapped in silver blankets, tubes in her arms, breathing mask over her face. His heart clenched. He knelt beside her as the medics gave him space. "She's the one," he whispered. She crossed the stars for a voice. Her fingers twitched when she heard his voice again. Ethan leaned closer, tears falling from his eyes. "I never stopped reading," he said softly. "You kept your promise." She blinked slowly and her lips moved. "Ethan," she whispered, then fell into sleep again. He stayed by her side the whole night, reading to her, not into a transmitter this time, but directly. His voice was the medicine she needed more than anything. Back on Varelia, the palace was in chaos. The queen sat on her throne with a trembling hand. Messages from nearby systems were pouring in. "Your daughter was found aboard a damaged vessel," one report said. "Rescued by humans, receiving care," said another. The council demanded she deny the girl, erase her name forever, but the queen stood slowly, her eyes wet but strong. "She is my daughter," she said quietly, "and she is more royal than all of you." Silence followed, as if the walls themselves were re-listening. On the space station, the princess slowly regained strength. Her body was weak, but her spirit was unshaken. Every day, Ethan sat beside her, reading stories, telling jokes, helping her eat and learn. He asked for her name. She paused for a long moment and said, "I don't have one." Ethan smiled and said, "Then we'll find one together." She liked the name Star, and Ethan agreed. "Because you crossed the stars to find me," he said. Her eyes lit up with pride. For the first time in her life, she chose her name, and it felt like freedom. Weeks passed, and she walked for the first time with help, not because her legs were healed, but because Ethan supported her with every step. He built her a lightweight exo-harness, adjusted carefully to her small size. She laughed when she stood tall, even if her wings still drooped behind her. One day, a delegation from Varelia arrived, not to take her back, but to ask her to speak. Her story had reached other worlds. People called her the brave star child. They wanted to know what gave her strength. She stood before them, tiny and shaking, with Ethan beside her and said, "I was rejected by everyone I knew. But one voice from the stars told me I mattered. And I followed that voice through the dark." Applause erupted, not out of pity, but respect. And in that moment, she knew something powerful. She didn't need wings. She didn't need a crown. She had his words, and now her own. And though Earth was still far from Varelia, her heart had already made the journey. Because sometimes, the strongest will lives inside the smallest soul, and all it takes is a single voice to set it free. The space station's garden dome was quiet. Soft light from the simulated sun warmed the artificial grass. Tiny Star sat on a smooth bench near the water pond, her small legs dangling, her wings gently folded. She wore a simple blue robe, made from soft earth fabric. Beside her sat Ethan, a book in his hands, a smile on his face. "I never thought I'd meet you like this," he said gently. Star looked down, her cheeks slightly pink. "I thought I'd die in space," she whispered. "But I wanted to hear your voice one more time." "You did more than that," Ethan replied. "You crossed galaxies." She chuckled softly, her voice still light and quiet. "But I'm still broken," she said, touching her limp wings. "I'm still not like others." Ethan set the book down and turned toward her. "No," he said firmly. You are not like others. You're stronger." Her eyes met his, uncertain and soft. "You don't have to say that just to make me feel better." "I don't," he replied, his voice calm. "I say it because it's true." There was silence between them for a while, just the sound of water trickling and wind humming through the air vents. Then he spoke again, more quietly this time. "You are beautiful to me." Star froze, her breath caught in her chest, her eyes wide. She had heard many words in her life, cruel ones, harsh ones, quiet ones, but never this, never from anyone. Not even Maya had said those words. No one had ever dared. Even with, she started, touching her bent leg, her uneven fingers. Ethan gently held her hand. "With everything," he said. "With your heart, your courage, your journey, all of it." She looked at their hands, his large and warm, hers tiny and trembling. She had never been touched with kindness before, only with duty or fear or silence. "Back home," she whispered. "They called me useless. They said I should never be seen. Then they were blind," Ethan said, "because I see you now, and I will never forget what I see." Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from pain, but from release, like something inside her had been holding its breath for years and now it finally exhaled. "You are the first person who ever looked at me and didn't turn away," she said. "You are the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't a mistake." Ethan didn't speak. He just nodded and let her cry softly beside him. There was no need to fix her, no need to offer promises or pity. He was simply there, and that was enough. Later that day, the crew aboard the station whispered about them. "Is that the alien girl who flew here alone?" "She's so small," someone said. "But did you hear what she did? She crossed light years in a pod that should have died halfway, with a damaged body and no wings, with just a voice to guide her." People began to respect her, not as royalty, not as a symbol, but as a person. One evening, as the stars returned outside the dome's view, Ethan read her a new story, one he wrote just for her, about a princess with broken wings who soared on courage. When he finished, he looked at her and said, "That story is yours." She leaned her head on his arm, her voice a whisper. "Then write me more." And he smiled, because he already had, in every word, every message, every whisper he ever sent into the dark, he had been writing about her all along. The garden dome was filled with warm light. Bird sounds played softly through hidden speakers, and the scent of flowers drifted in the air. Star walked slowly between the plants, her legs supported by a light exo-frame Ethan had built just for her. Her balance was shaky, but she smiled with every step, not because walking was easy, but because it was hers. Ethan stood nearby, watching her with pride. "She's getting stronger every day," the medic whispered to him. "Not just her body," Ethan replied, "her spirit too." News of the tiny alien princess had spread across several systems. She had no wings, no throne, no formal name in her royal records, but she had done what no one else had dared. She followed a human voice across the stars, and survived. Messages came in daily. Other disabled children from alien colonies sent her notes, drawings, and thank you letters. To them, she was a hero. To Ethan, she was a miracle. One day, the Queen of Varelia arrived. No soldiers, no throne guards, just a plain cloak and a heavy heart. She entered the dome quietly, finding her daughter among the leaves. Star turned slowly, unsure whether to bow or hide. The Queen stepped forward and knelt. It shocked everyone. Even Ethan froze where he stood. "I was wrong," the Queen said softly. "I feared your weakness, when I should have honored your strength. You were not born broken. You were born brave." Star stared at her mother, the one who had once refused to speak her name. Now she was kneeling, her voice trembling, her eyes wet. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Star whispered. The Queen nodded. "I don't ask for that. I only came to see what my daughter became." Ethan watched quietly, heart heavy. He stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Star's shoulder. "She didn't become anything," he said. "She always was this." For a long time, no one spoke. Then Star took a breath in. It looked at her mother. "I still don't want to return to Varelia," she said. "But if I ever do, it will be by choice." The queen nodded again and left without argument, and Star stood taller than ever before. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Star began a small broadcast of their own. Together, they read stories, Earth stories, Varelian myths, new tales they wrote side by side. Children across planets tuned in to listen, not just for entertainment, but for hope. They called the show Voices Through the Stars, and every episode began with Star's words. Even if you have no wings, you can still fly with your heart. She no longer cared what anyone said about her body, her limp leg, her soft wings. They weren't flaws, they were part of her story. She didn't need to fix herself to be strong. She didn't need to rule to have worth. She had already changed lives simply by being. One night, while sitting under the artificial stars, Ethan turned to her and said, "If I had never sent those broadcasts, I might have never known you." Star smiled, her voice calm and warm. "And if I hadn't heard your voice, I would have never known myself." They held hands in silence. No royalty, no distance, no fear. Just a girl who had been thrown away, and a man whose words had reached farther than he ever dreamed. And in that quiet space, surrounded by stars, they proved something no one could deny. She was a princess, yes. But more than that, she was free. Because she was never waiting for wings, she had always been flying, with love, with courage, and with words.